Good evening. Welcome to Athens City Council, Monday, March 4th, 2013. Tonight, Council will be meeting in a regular session. We will have some resolutions, some ordinances to vote on, and some to be introduced by their sponsors. First of all, we'll establish a quorum. All council members are present, which clearly establishes a quorum. Actually, I have some communications this evening. We have received a accountant's compilation of the financial position of Athens Community Television. This report will be on the table in the council chambers if anybody wants to look at it. Also, we have received the annual report of the Athens County Municipal Court, and that also will be on the table in the council chambers. We are pursuing the annexation of some property known as the Columbia Gas property out on East State Street. The proposal has been in the council office as directed by ordinance for 60 days. Again, this will be in the council office, not necessarily on display, because the council clerk will be writing an ordinance for first reading to come up at our next meeting. So we have 3 documents that will be available in the council office during regular office hours. Those are my communications. Mayor, do you have communication?
Well, I think there was some queries about the water line breaks last Monday, Tuesday. I think that was one of the issues. I believe I sent council a synopsis from Andy Stone, Director of Public Works. Essentially, I think they had a debriefing meeting early today to look at whether to do other things. He did report back to me that he was in error about when it started, which I think he said sometime like noon Monday. It actually started like 3 a.m. Monday morning. And he says the pipes are probably 1940s or older. In terms of probably he's talking about the North Congress Street break. It started at Court Street, then there's one on Pine, then another on Pine, then one on North Congress, and another on North Congress. We had quite a bit of overtime generated. Of course, a lot of work. I believe Councilman Reisner was asking about the total cost of the thing. He had cited about $21,000, $22,000. Included in that, of course, is he talked about the water loss, which was, let's see if I got my decimal points, 4 million gallons. But that's just a cost about $6,000, and he's talking about the processing cost, not the retail cost, what it would do if somebody turned on the tap that long. So all told about, let's see, in terms of parts, about 7,700. In terms of overtime, about 7,700 as well, a little bit more or less. So again, it's quite a bit, and they were working very hard. Part of the review that we went through, of course, was safety factors too, because we had some people working almost in excess of 36 hours, I believe, on site, just because they were trying to get a hold of it, I guess. So that's all I really have to report. Again, some of the other ones, of course, is that get the cars off the street. We're going to have the street sweeper running quite a bit this week because the students are out. So if you have off-street parking, make use of it so we can clean up those streets. The other one is we'll be doing some brick repair along the various brick areas, just kind of putting them back in shape. And that will be on the major streets, Court, College, the ones that have bricks that we need to kind of fill in the blanks. And that's all I really have.
Can I ask a question about this?
Yes.
In terms of private property that was damaged by the flooding and things, I understand some of the homes that were lower were flooded, some of the basements and things. Are we liable or?
Probably so. They are told to present claims to us, get their insurance carrier to go in, do an assessment, and get it to us as soon as possible. Sometimes usually we cover the claims, I think. Sometimes we don't. I couldn't tell you when it does or doesn't. Many times the law director will see it eventually if it doesn't get resolved properly. Yeah, there was some, I'm aware at least one house had some flooding. I'm surprised I didn't hear more about it because of the amount of water that was lost along the way. A lot of it was being pumped out. A lot of it was coming out of the hydrants to try to reduce the pressure. Again, it was one of these issues where we didn't have a valve between the break on Congress and the Highland Park Reservoir. And they opened up the hydrants to get that down. Actually, we had about 4 pumps running. I think one pump crashed. When I was there at 8 o'clock in the morning, Tuesday morning, one pump was kaput, and they were actually getting assistance from Ohio University for an extra pump. So Ohio University helped us, some of the crew, as well as some of their equipment, which is always useful. And again, they were trying to bring that stuff in as fast as they could.
Well, in terms of public safety, say that there had been a house fire in the neighborhood, were we in danger there with this much water loss?
When that
in the lines?
happens, there is, of course, we have a water shortage
Right.
procedure.
Still need to.
We also bring out the pumper trucks, and we basically bring everybody in on actually, what you don't see in this cost is probably overtime for the fire department, I believe. Again, this is just coming out of Public Works, but we put everybody on call, I believe, and we have pumper trucks that are good for all 2 minutes to put out a fire.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it would be a question of trying to get that to and from.
Right.
There is always a danger with that. It's no different than we've had occasions where buildings don't have their fire protection. Their alarm system goes down, and at that point, we put somebody in place to make sure there's somebody checking it. There are procedures for that, yes.
Do they have any handle on why the multiple breaks? I can understand one catastrophic one, but why it would spider web out like that?
It's probably not a case of a water hammer, but it's probably a case of when you depressurize something. I don't know if you've ever seen a garden hose kind of expand when you turn on the hose and you haven't turned on the other end. As much as this is not plastic, it does have a capacity to shrink. When they brought it back up on pressure, they did it very slowly. The conversation I had before they had fixed the break and before they started repressurizing it is they fully expected to have another break almost immediately, just because the depressurization and repressurization would cause that. It's just, as you say, it is a spider web, so you pull on one side,
That's right.
transmits all the way to the other side.
So I guess you just had to expect it with the materials in the ground are just getting old.
Well, it's a question of age, conditions. There's freeze-thaw events. There's also dry events. We can have, we have a lot of soils that compress and expand depending on how much water's in them. So you add some water and it inflates. You change the temperature, it has the same thing. Again, this was just a series of them right along the way.
Right.
So being at ground zero or near ground zero there, so currently the street is pretty torn up because of the water that was going down the street. It's tore up the asphalt, and there's a large rut on the east side of the street. So I assume they'll be fixing that.
They will probably
soon.
patch it sooner or later. Usually they let it settle a little bit before they do that.
It's pretty
So
bad.
they'll let everybody kind of compress it a little bit with their cars and go from there. I don't even know. Last I saw, Pine was closed. I think it's open by now.
I think it's
Okay.
open,
Yeah, and part of it because they weren't sure how much had been undercut by the first break. I know they were concerned about that there was so much erosion under there, you'd get a nice layer of asphalt and nothing underneath. You'd have a nice, Athens sinkhole, I guess, or something. But as far as I know, they try fixing it as fast as possible. And again, it would be cold patch, so they're going to do their best. Okay.
I want to say thank you to Andy Stone and his crews, because they were down in that water when it was 30 degrees, 36 degrees for a lot of hours.
It was Phil.
And, I think that these sort of things do happen with the infrastructure that we have. Not only is it, quite a number of years, but also the geography that we have around here and the geology. And I want to say thank you to the cooperation between OU and the city. I think that I know that I talked to Andy and a couple of the other people, and it was an emotional time because to make the choice to drain Highland was, you have to make an emotional choice, and it's an engineering choice, but they also are looking out for what's best for the citizens, and sometimes it's not necessarily what seems best to everybody who's not having water pressure, but they are the professionals, and I appreciate them going on and doing what they needed to do.
And they spend a lot of time trying to figure, when they decide to drain it, they actually had to say, okay, how can we segregate the other reservoirs away from it? And what sections would be actually impacted? And again, it's easy to say, yes, we can cut this valve and segregate this reservoir from this reservoir. But one of the things I see around here is that these valves, you put valves in to stop flows. Some of these valves don't get touched for 20 years. I'm sure you've worked with some of your faucets where you turn the one underneath the sink to replace a washer.
It strips.
And it doesn't work.
Yes.
So, and I've seen them where they're working their way up the street, so I can say, okay, we tried this one, it shut it down this much, now shut it down this much, and until they find one that really will close it down, or at least enough that they can work on the valve.
Yeah.
And again, I know they had multiple breaks in both locations on Pine and Congress, North Congress.
I appreciate what they did.
I would just add to that I think Andy Stone also has a plan, a comprehensive plan, and he's slowly, as we appropriate money as well, fixing portions of the infrastructure. And so, obviously, this was an area that hasn't been totally fixed. Higher up had been fixed over this past year, but, so I just think you can't fix everything all at one time.
If you
and that's
remember
a process.
last year we were trying to get both the Harrison-Ranson area as well as Joneswood done, as well as West Union. We had to drop West Union from the mix because of the money involved.
Right.
And again, we took out a loan for that, so that you can tell that we can only do so much any given year. And that's no guarantee it won't break again. I mean, again, a good hammer or something like that, or just bad piping. I think we had a break on Sunnyside this past 2 weeks, and that was actually one area we had already worked on recently, so there's no guarantee.
Yeah, so that's right.
Doesn't have a lot of moving parts, but it's enough to break.
Personally, I was in contact with a couple residents in that area throughout the day. The worst part was happening. And not only were the full-time residents of the area, they were impressed with the hard work and obviously dangerous work that these people were doing. And throughout it all, the workers were always courteous, answering questions, reminding people to stay safe and all that. So it was well noticed by the people of the area there, the good work.
Okay.
And I've passed that on to Director Stone also.
I don't have anything else that I can think of.
Auditor Peck.
Yes, I do have two items I'd like to address tonight. The first one is in reference to an article that was in the A News today about the town hall budget talks, state budget talks. And in the article, they reference a document that was handed out there by One Ohio Now, and listing Athens City as losing $64,000 since Kasich's first biennial budget in 2011. I don't know where they got that, and that's fine, and the news was just referencing what they were handed. However, I think council should know that last year we collected $260,000 just in estate taxes, which will be gone. The last year was it for that. Our local government funds have been going down. Last year we collected $557,720. This year, our estimate, which is based on information we get from the county auditor's office, our local government funds flow through there. That's where we actually get our check from. And our estimate for this year is $376,000, which is a difference of $181,000. So, the total loss just this year for us in just those two areas is $441,000. So, this 64,000 might be referring to something else, but those two things it's pretty clear that our losses from the recent budgets are much higher. The second thing I'd like to address, and I gave council a handout, is a CCA update, so you could all see where we are on this. Today, this is as of last Friday, updated today, $139,000 has been billed by CCA. They've collected $52,000. We've collected $10,700 in-house, and that is from people who have come in for help, and we've helped them comply with the 5 years that CCA requested. But it's obvious once they get into the process, they realize that they owe for 11 and 12 also. And so several people have come into compliance with that. There's $87,000 in outstanding invoicing that CCA plans to do. Approximately one-third of the taxpayers have responded. It's actually 37%, which CCA says is pretty good for the first letters. We should be getting a check from CCA for $49,000 for February. We also now have over 30 new reoccurring taxpayers, because now that we know who they are and that they owe us taxes, which is really, besides the money, which we obviously need, we have no good way of finding these people, and that's why we entered into this program to begin with. And anyway, and then just a couple other things I'd like to add regarding issues that people have brought up about this. But as I said, we need the money, but also every year when the auditors come, they ask us what we're doing to find delinquent taxpayers. And because we have non-mandatory filing, it's difficult. However, I will just add an aside that the non-mandatory only applies if you don't owe taxes. If you owe us taxes, then you're supposed to, file. But we have an obligation and a responsibility to do that. And we're in a position now where our state money is being cut. And personally, we didn't get any letters in my house, me, my husband, or my daughter. My husband works out of town. I've mentioned this before, and his employer withholds. And I would rather try to help people come into compliance than have to ask council to raise money to pay our bills. It's a matter of fairness. Everybody should be paying. A couple other issues that have been brought up had to do with such things as the blanketed audit. Not everybody got a letter. They didn't just send phishing letters out to everyone in Athens. We had parameters. It was triggered by the income on their federal return that would be taxable to Athens. If there was no taxable income, then no letter was sent, such as if their income was from retirement or capital gains only, they wouldn't have gotten it. We have lists, they have lists of what is taxable. And that's not up to us in the city of Athens. That's statutory requirements, what we can and can't tax as far as income. We also had a threshold of $10,000. Anybody making less than $10,000 just wasn't even looked at, if they're making that small amount of money. The innocent taxpayer, the people who've come into our office, many of them have been angry, not all of them, but they've left not being angry. I can tell you that right now. I would say more unaware or uninformed than innocent. When you get pulled over for speeding on the highway, you're not technically innocent. That's your responsibility to pay attention to the speed limit signs. You might have been unaware, you might have missed it, but it's just like with taxes. The burden is on the taxpayer. The IRS, the state, they're not going to say, "Oh, you didn't know? Okay, forget it." You're going to get your penalty and interest, and you're going to have to pay your taxes when they find you. And what we're really doing is trying to help people come into compliance. Most of the people were unaware, and that's why they're kind of angry and they're shocked, because these aren't people that are they're not tax evaders. They just didn't know, or they didn't know that their employer wasn't withholding. A lot of people, if you're not an accountant, you just don't really pay that much attention to that, or you rely on someone to help you with that. And we are not treating them like that. We don't think of them like that. There hasn't been one person that came into the office that we thought, oh, they knew they owed and they just didn't pay us. It's just really not the way it is. And the other thing I want to say is the amnesty program. Some of the other things that have been talked about is having people only pay the taxes owed, not the penalty and interest. Over the years, I've been we do have the professional judgment ability to forgive penalty and interest. However, penalty is one thing, but the interest is another. This is money that we should have had in our coffers for years. Keep in mind that some of these people that are paying for 6 through 10 might have owed taxes for 20 and 30 years before that, and we didn't know it, they didn't know it, and we can't go after that. So the interest, and we are giving them, it has been cut down dramatically for what would have been, charged, what we have in our statute, in our code to charge. But we did not let anybody in the amnesty program off without paying interest, and it just doesn't feel fair to me to let these taxpayers off completely either. However, those penalties have been cut drastically. I guess that's mostly what I want to say about that. Although Tina did have a couple other comments, we've already collected enough money to pay for another police or firefighter. This is a lot of money we're talking about. We've exceeded our expectations already. And we will continue to collect more money from the people who now realize that they've been in there. Finally, and the other thing is about the, low-income people. Well, you know what? If you just stop for a minute and think of how many minimum wage jobs there are in Athens, we're a service community. All of those people who work in the city are paying their taxes because their employer's withholding them. So someone who happens to work up the road and doesn't make a lot of money, I don't think should be let off the hook, because we're collecting from everybody, who works at minimum wage positions here in Athens. It's really a matter of fairness. As I've said before, I pay my taxes, and I think everyone else should. Nobody likes it. People who are unaware of the school district tax didn't get any breaks, and they did not waive any penalties on that either. Finally, I just want to comment on a taxpayer who came in today who was told she had actually already complied with CCA, but came in to talk to us about her other returns, and had been told by someone, a friend or colleague, that she should visit our office, that she will get answers right then and there, and that we will help them. And of course, when she left, she said that was absolutely true, and she was glad she came in, and that she said at least she knows where these taxes go, to police, fire, to our streets, and that beautiful community center that we have. So I guess I would just like to put a more positive spin on this, that, we're not asking anything of anybody that they aren't supposed to be paying. Thanks.
Kathy, I did receive a letter saying I was okay. Is that?
Oh, yeah. They sent out 575 letters letting people know that they had complied and that they were done with CCA. They did. And we've had over 600 people actually contact CCA. Like I said, it's 37%. But yes, they sent out a lot of letters letting people know that they were okay. So I'm glad the mayor got one.
Member Butler?
Thank you. Thank you, Auditor Heck, for the update. Would you be able to guess or offer a projected revenue for you said over 30 new reoccurring taxpayers have been identified? Could you maybe guesstimate what that might be in a year, that projected revenue?
I really don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
Let me think about it.
Sure, thank you.
We might be able to look at the people who have actually filed for 11 and 12 in our office and get an idea. But yearly, moving forward. But, 30 people, even if they only owed us $100.
Right, and you mentioned that it likely would be enough to pay for a police officer or a firefighter, is that?
That's what we've collected already, yeah.
Okay.
They've got, 52,000 plus 10,000 that we've collected in our office. That's almost 63,000 right there, plus another almost 50,000 billed. And, we're only maybe a third of the way through the program, you might say.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think it will make a difference. I think it is the right thing to do for our city.
I've heard from a number of individuals who also were audited and then received the all clear letter in reply saying that everything was fine. But one of the things that I wanted to share with Tina Timmerman is that everyone who did speak to her that contacted me said that they were treated professionally, kindly. They understood everything when they walked away after having to go through the process. because as everyone knows, who I also was audited and received the all clear letter at the end, and it was a pretty curt letter to begin with, and a curt letter saying you were all clear. But
Well, just for the record, Tina wrote that one, the second letter. I don't know, maybe it's a tax thing, and we're just kind of, short and sweet.
I do
You're,
know
you're
that-
clear, we're not, babysitters here, but yeah, sorry. We'll work on the next one.
Oh, I didn't mind that. But I did want to share that everyone that I've spoken to said that they were treated very well by Tina. And
Tina's
again,
very
everything was clear.
knowledgeable, and I feel like she's a lot calmer than I might have been having to deal with, people who just think we're, we're the bad guy. But, she believes in what she's doing, and I do too. I do too. This is our obligation and responsibility to collect taxes due the city. And, we're not trying to beat anybody over the head to do it, but, this seemed like our best recourse since we don't have mandatory filing. So anyway, I appreciate that. I'll pass that on to Tina. She'll be glad because she's had a few rough days.
I'd like to point out that I didn't have very many people complain, and those who did said that they got their questions answered, and in a professional way. I think that it needs to be said that this is the first time that we've gone through this, and we have learned lessons. Mm-hmm. And so the next time we go through the process, it will probably be better because we have learned those lessons and we now know more about the process, and we can be informed and help, especially with the letters.
Yes.
I think that some people were upset with the letters because they were, and some people,
They were
I think,
just too direct, but
Right.
Tina and I both read those, and, we're like,
Right.
yeah, this is what it is. It's a sample letter that other cities have used.
Right.
And,
But I think that we know more now,
Right.
and
Right,
also
we're
I think-
absolutely willing to make those changes.
Right, and I think that people need to understand that we can't do this because we don't have access to the IRS
Right.
files, and that's the reason we're doing this. Maybe that needs to be communicated better.
Yeah.
Because we can't, we
It
can't
does.
do
I
it.
put it out there to anybody who has asked specifically, but yes, there's probably very few entities throughout the country that have that access. You have to have 250,000, a population of that or more, and you have to be willing to operate this program.
Right.
To want that information. That's why Cleveland is the only, place in Ohio that does that, and
And in the long run, the taxpayers probably don't want lots of people to have access to that information. So
Right.
in a lot of ways, being able to
that's the other side of the coin. I think that they should know that we don't see any of this, and we never will in our office. That's why they get the letters from them. They resolve it with them. If someone comes and asks us to help and shows us all their paperwork, that's one thing. But CCA is not sharing anything with us. It's highly confidential, and they're really, they're doing that. Yes, and we don't have access to that. Yes, we've learned from the letters, and yes, I hope that council doesn't make a decision. I think if you look at how many people have complained compared to the number of people who have actually complied and not said anything, it's a pretty small percentage. And next time around, it would only be for 1 year. This first time out, we asked for 5 years to get caught up, and it would be a very different process if we do this again. So. But we have until about June to make that decision, so.
Yeah, thank you for the report, and it looks like we are collecting quite a bit of money from this. Is this 139,000 based on the one-third that have responded, or is that based on the entire 2,200?
Oh, no, only the ones that have responded. They don't know, people who haven't responded, they don't know if they owe. That's why they're asking for the W-2s. What they're looking at are IRS returns. They don't see the W-2s. They see like your 1040 page or whatever you file. So they're just going by what your wages are listed as. And so they don't know until they, contact someone. So that, yes, that 139,000 is based on the 600 plus who have responded.
Anybody else? Thank you, Auditor Head.
Thank you.
We have another elected official, Law Director Lang.
No report tonight, Mr. President.
Okay. We'll move on to ordinances for third reading then. Ordinance 1213, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit a fiscal 2013 Community Housing Improvement Program, CHIP, grant application to the Office of Community Development, Ohio Development Services Agency, ODSA, and designating Hocking Athens Perry Community Action Agency as the Community Housing Improvement Program Grant Contract Administrator and declaring an emergency. Introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we adopt 1213.
Second.
As the very long title indicates, that this is a grant that we will hopefully receive. And we've done this approximately every other year. And it's an important grant because it helps to rehabilitate housing stock within the city of Athens. We've had a public hearing on this and also some hearings through committee.
There will be another public hearing, I believe, and I know we're having a meeting Thursday to look at some of the housing strategies to review it. It's part of requirement, as well as look at our updating our housing strategy and what works best. The Department of Development Services agency has a laundry list of things that would be possible to use, a consolidated plan, and we'll be reviewing that, as well as doing, we put it out to some of the members of the community in terms of a survey of what would work best. And again, there's only limited things that can work, but the idea is to look at that. And the emergency clause, of course, I think the deadline date is April 1st, which is why there's emergency clause.
This ordinance for third reading. All those in favor of ordinance 1213 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance is passed. Ordinance 1413, an ordinance amending the 2013 appropriation ordinance, introduced by Councilmember Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt ordinance 1413.
Second.
Thank you. This ordinance, again, is to increase the appropriations from other funds into Fund 865 Internal Services, to just kind of itemize the different funds to where the funding is coming from. General Fund, $25,795. The Street Fund, $20,300. Recreation Fund, $1,750. Community Center, $3,600, Water Fund, $13,400, and the garage, $500.
All those in favor of ordinance 1413 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance is adopted. Now quickly we move on to ordinances for second reading. Ordinance 1813, an ordinance amending the Athens City Code to establish Title 45, Historic and Architectural Preservation. Introduced by all council members. I think, Member Fall, you introduced that?
Yeah.
Yes. And there's no discussion at this time?
No.
I don't believe. Okay. And we have some ordinances for first reading. Ordinance 1913. An ordinance authorizing construction and construction engineering of the wastewater treatment plant improvements, Project 266, and declaring an emergency. Introduced by Councilmember Nisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a few items to report on. This is for a very large project, over $19 million. It will be a 20-year loan, and what it will do is bring forward our wastewater treatment plant with improvements in the primary clarifiers and the way of also purifying the water. So we assure that we are up to date. This should stand us in good stead for the next 60 years, we're hopeful.
And we're also, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but Director Stone has indicated that this would also solve any problems with odor in the
We are very hopeful that it will improve the odor situation. I'm not going to guarantee, nor would he, I think, that it's going to totally eliminate it. But thank you for bringing that
But
up.
considering the subject matter, it's probably not a sure thing.
No. I do have a few other updates for you on this. We do have one minor correction on the math. If you'll remember from our worksheet last year, the final loan amount is a total of $19,121,000. And what we're doing with the amount that we're indicating in Ordinance 1913 is adding the $5,000 miscellaneous fee in that we spoke of last week that will be for unanticipated expenses that might not be allowable under the loan. So when you add 19,121 plus 5,000, that corrected amount should be 19,126. 027.47. So we just want to make sure that we're entering the correct loan amount on that before we borrow. There were several good questions, I think, that were asked last week about the design of the plant and other ways in which the water would be treated. One of the questions was whether or not we have plans for a natural gas generator in the specifications of the project, and the answer is yes on that. So I'll briefly go over these. Some of these were back and forth with Waterworks Department staff where they clarified it. We also received some information from the city planner on floodplain concerns, and he verified for us that the new preliminary treatment building was also designed per FEMA's floodproofing standards, and he submitted for us an attached certificate, and also told us that the lowest top of wall elevation for any new tanks is 642. Which is 4 feet above the 100-year base flood elevation. So thank you for asking those questions so we get them verified. The information on the $5,000 miscellaneous fee I made reference to just a moment ago, that's for costs that might arise during the project that are outside the scope of the loan. Sometimes there's small things like if we need to make extra copies for plan sets or things like that, or any surprise fees that the Ohio Department of Industrial Compliance might have us pay. Another question was asked about septage, and one of these questions came from a citizen, and I want to thank them for inquiring about it. Somebody was listening last week to all the discussion, and we were able to verify and confirm that our septage receiving station is for receiving domestic septage only. And the question was about fracking, and may have come up here in discussion also, the wastewater from fracking. Whether or not that would be allowed or not, and it is not permitted. But it is something we may want to look at, because I think some of what this also brought up is that state laws may be changing, and so we might want to look at the wastewater from that and the ways in which it's used. And those were the five updates that I had on questions about our discussion last week on this. So this particular ordinance that we're discussing right now lists the loan amount, and then what it also does is authorizes the construction and the construction engineering for this project. And you'll hear it now and in the future that it's project number 266.
And there will be other ordinances coming in the near future,
Right.
and later future probably too. Any questions about this? Moving on, Ordinance 2013, an ordinance amending the 2013 appropriation ordinance, again introduced by Councilmember Nisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request that we consider this ordinance under suspension of the rules.
Second.
The reason being that this particular appropriation ordinance is time-sensitive for the staff that we would be able to hire for city council office aides.
Okay, comments? Did I read the rules?
So we're considering it.
I'm sorry.
So the rules are suspended.
Okay. Okay, where are we with this? I'm
So I
sorry.
requested that they be suspended,
Okay.
and so may I now
Yes.
move for?
So all those in favor of suspending the rules on ordinance 2013 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, the rules have been suspended. Member Isley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of ordinance 2013.
Second.
And this particular ordinance is for the appropriation of $52,000 to the general fund, and it's for personnel services. Some of this is a budget correction in the council budget amount, and then the other part is for allowing council aides. We have made one minor modification in this. Rather than stipulating that it be just 2 aides, we've sometimes worked with 3 or 4 that might be part-time. So to give us a little bit of flexibility in that, rather than put 2 aides in the number, we have put the phrase "as needed." So just so you're aware of it.
Okay. All those in favor of ordinance 2013 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Ordinance 2013 is adopted. And we move on to ordinance 2113, an ordinance amending the 2013 police staffing and the part-time and seasonal staffing levels and declaring an emergency. Member Isley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request that we consider ordinance 2113 under suspension of the rules.
Second.
We have a motion and an approval to suspend the rules on ordinance 2113. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay. The rules have been suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of ordinance 2113.
Second.
And this particular ordinance has to do with our part-time and seasonal employees. That is the heading of the document that we're looking at. And council members have been provided a copy of this. The particular position that this applies to is in the police department, and it is an interim temporary data clerk position of somebody to help in the police department through April 30. What's happened is that we had one of our one data entry operator has retired, and so we hired a new one. And what the city often does is there's an overlap training period. What we typically would have done through the personnel office is hire somebody by contract for that part-time, but there are new regulations from the Public Employees Retirement System that say we must bring that person who will be our former employee who will be training the new employee. We must actually bring that person back on payroll. So we just need to make sure we're in compliance with the Public Employees Retirement System to do that. This person would be here through April 30. It is short-term, and I believe that the expense would be no more than $2,500 is the estimate that we received.
Do you have any other questions or discussion? Then all those in favor of ordinance 2113 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. This ordinance is also passed. Ordinance 2213, an ordinance granting a revocable license to Gator Guys LLC to permit a balcony at 63 North Court Street that will encroach over and upon the public right-of-way. Introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think that there's some discussion to be had about this particular ordinance.
I move to amend this ordinance, and the amendment that I would like to propose is 24 inches, as well as a partition between the units that was not included in the last ordinance when it was written. And that kind of negates with the 24 inches the rule of the 25 people. So in making this move, I wanted to do a real quick recap because there's been some information presented in the news, in the papers, that is not accurate. When this was brought before, do I need a second?
She needs a second.
I'll second.
A second. So when this was brought forward to the Board of Zoning Appeals, there was no balcony with the approval. So that's one fact that's been put out there, that this 11-foot balcony existed, and that's not true. The Board of Zoning Appeals did not grant the variance with that. So basically, there was nothing on the front of the building but some type of architectural grade or whatever you wanted to call it on the front of the building. Then it moved to the Planning Commission because there was a change of use that also occurred because it had been a restaurant, and so it's now becoming housing and residential. And so those plans needed to be approved by the Planning Commission. Again, there was no real discussion, and the plans that were showed included a balcony. Whenever you come before council for a revocable or a license, you're asking to move into our right-of-way. So that was what was brought before council, and the developers asked for 4 feet, 48 inches. The reason that I moved to amend tonight is that I find that there's a real difference between livable space, a 48-inch balcony space, versus 24 inches, which is more of an architectural feature, and you're allowed to walk out, Juliet balcony kind of thing. But you're not living out there. There's not a lot of space to live, to put furniture, to do any of that, even though that's in the ordinance that we've been looking at. You know, furniture could be put out there. So this kind of takes away some of the 24 inches, from my point of view, takes away some of the issues that our code director, our planning commission, or not planning, our planner has indicated to us, and some of the issues that the police department had also cited as concerns. We've also had quite a bit of input from community members. Many of us on council have heard that, as well as some business owners as well, regarding this type of structure being added to the side of a building in downtown Athens. So that's why I've moved to amend.
So, and I'm sorry, could you restate
Restate.
your amendment?
My amendment is to amend the projection off the side of this building to 24 inches. And we do have some buildings on Court Street that have something that sticks out 24 inches. And that a petition be drawn between the 2 units so that Unit A, people can't move on the balcony in front of Unit B's, on the balcony, that there's a petition there. So I think I would feel safer if I lived in a building where my neighbors could just come over and look in my windows. So a petition there. And I think that kind of negates the 25 people maximum that was also the fire chief had recommended.
So we have an amendment that has been proposed to this ordinance. We have any council members who wish to discuss it?
Thank you, President. Thank you, President Sands. Thank you, Member Pappy. I just had a question about procedure, because I do support part of Member Pappy's request. I do believe that the architectural petition separating the spaces, I do support that. And I'm curious, within this procedure, is it possible to accept part of the amendment, or do we vote on 2 different amendments, or do they have to be included?
I would believe that we vote on 2 different amendments then.
Well, it'd actually be up to the person making the motion. If you wanted to withdraw your motion and then resubmit your amendment separately, so it's doing it as two separate amendments that would be voted on separately. As the amendment's been made, it includes both issues within the same amendment, so we'd have to vote on it at once unless you wanted to withdraw your motion and then resubmit it as a separate issue, as two
So we
amendments.
could have an amendment 1 and an amendment 2?
Right, we would need an amendment, the amendment and the second both withdrawn, and then just remake the amendment.
I can do that. That's not a problem.
I could withdraw. Second.
So I move to amend Amendment 1, that we do a 24-inch architectural, whatever we want to call this, protrusion, whatever, off the side of the building. And I assume the 25 people could come at that point. That would make sense. We would need that on there. And then Amendment 2 would be,
But we just need a second on that amendment.
oh, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Second.
okay, and then we can debate that amendment and then vote on that amendment, and then we can submit the second one after we voted on the first amendment.
So the proposal in front of us now is the balcony that we've spoken of, limited to 24 inches wide, if I'm understanding that. So we have a second on that motion, on that amendment.
Is this an appropriate moment to have discussion as well? Is that acceptable?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Did
So-
you have something to add?
Yes, that I do support Member Pappy's amendment for the partition, but I'm
Well, we're only talking about 24 inches.
sorry. My apologies. There are two different ones now. Right, sorry.
Okay.
No comment.
Member Nisley?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would support the 24-inch amendment for a variety of reasons. I know that we've had some reports that there are other balconies throughout town that might be different lengths, or widths, excuse me, depths protruding from the building. And I know that some of our earlier discussion commented on a willingness to compromise from what was originally proposed in the revocable license. So I think this amendment is still in the spirit of it. I think the other thing that this does then, for me, is pay respect to what our planner and our code enforcement director think is important in the city, as well as the safety concerns of our police and fire department. And gives a way of saying that we hear that, we acknowledge it, we respect their expertise, and we're trying to work also in a spirit, I suppose, of compromise with the developer and the architectural plans.
Give comments from council members? Member Fall?
I also think that this is a good compromise. I know that this has been very controversial, and some people say, well, how can you argue over a balcony? However, we've had many citizens come forward with safety concerns, and that has to be acknowledged. And anybody who's been in any of the parades going up and, with safety concerns of large balconies where a lot of people can go and congregate on. And I know that we want something that's aesthetically pleasing, we want something that's safe, and we want to compromise. I think for many people, you can go out and smoke, and it's not a huge balcony, but it's not just a railing in front of the window, which theoretically, if we didn't give anything, that's what would happen. So, as I've said many, many times, and as the committee chair for planning and development, planning and development is always a balancing act, and as committee chair, I've tried to balance all these different things in developing this ordinance with Pat Lang's immense help, and citizens, and noise control, and the police, and the fire, and you have to also look at the planner and the other administrators who have had real concerns about this. So this is trying to balance.
I saw some hands down this way. Member Patterson?
Thank you, Mr. President. This raises several different issues in terms of clarity with having an amendment of this nature. Number one, as the document reads right now, that it's a contract that will be revocable at any point in time. And so would that still hold with a 24-inch balcony? And the other question comes in is there is no, I'd like to have some sense as to numbers of people. If you're going from 25 down to what? I mean, there's no sense in terms of the numbers of people for a limit. I do also want to point out that in looking at the document, the approval sheet for the revocable license, the police chief and the fire chief both did comment. They did not recommend. Instead, they came in with a limit of number of people who can be using the deck or the balcony, which is 25. And the police chief said that the lease would have to be strengthened in terms of maintaining the noise ordinance or upholding the noise ordinance as well as the nuisance party ordinance, which the Gator Guys LLC have done that. One other thing I want to point out real quick is that we on council have seen a number of issues that have come up where I believe negotiated and were able to reach, I think, a reasonable compromise. A good example would be the R2 and R1 change that happened just recently. I know that Gator Guys LLC has worked very hard in terms of compromises, have come up with several revisions to their lease, has come up with several options for changing the length of the patio or the balcony itself to include noise barriers and whatnot. So I do want to point that out, that it hasn't been a one-sided negotiation up to this point in time. It's been I think, a very reasonable negotiation process that's taken place. I believe that 24 inches is excessive in terms of reducing it down. When you look at the cost of a feature like that, it really isn't much of a usable space to have something of that size. So.
And Member Gosney, you got your hand up.
Yeah. I think we've discussed this a huge amount. Reducing the size from 4 feet down to 2 feet, that's my left foot, my right foot. I mean, that's not a usable space. And I think that the dramatic improvements to this building will be even better with a reasonable outdoor usable space that's as proposed. And so I would speak against reducing the presence of a balcony to a 24-inch space. It's
Okay.
yeah. Go ahead.
Mayor Wild, did I see your hand up?
No.
Ken's got a comment.
Thank you. Thank you. I just had one more comment, and I know a lot of thought has gone into this discussion. I was going to ask briefly for the law director to comment about the precedent issue, because the concern, in my understanding and looking at the review from the planner, was the concern of this concept of the precedent that this might set. So,
I mean, to the extent that someone in the future applying for, such a right-of-way agreement, would be able to say, oh, you did it for this other person, you should be able to help us out as well. I mean, they can certainly make that argument from a legal standpoint. I wouldn't be too concerned about that as far as any sort of exposure or liability, just because, City Council is the guardian of the public property and of the public right-of-way, and is charged with the task of looking at these sorts of applications to determine whether it's in the public interest, and each case is different. So, a balcony over Court Street may not be the same as an encroachment on Stimson Avenue or in another part of the city, and so therefore, at least from a strictly legal standpoint, I would not be terribly concerned with, with any sort of a setting of precedent on that, because again, if someone wants to try to make a legal issue out of that, the fact that each individual case is different, I think gives us, a fair amount of protection in that regard.
okay.
So, did that answer your question?
I believe so.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that would be, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that you said that's what city council is looking at when we look at the right-of-way issue. And when we move in to the right-of-way with larger protrusions, we are looking at safety issues. We are looking at all these issues we've all discussed. I won't go back into them. And I again say that from an administrative point of view, there were some pretty specific things that they mentioned. And we're putting the onus, we have a lease, which is fine, but a patrol officer driving down the street, is he going to remember there's only 20? Oh my gosh, I'm going to stop and count how many people are up on that balcony. Or are they really supposed to have furniture on that balcony? They're not, we're not going to put that on our patrol officers. They don't have enough time to do that. And code certainly doesn't work in the evenings or whatever. So I just think, again, here we are, this body, going to make that vote tonight, and we need to make sure that we are paying attention to our right-of-way. And that's the point.
Roger, I'm asking, is it appropriate for the audience to speak about this?
It would be the same rule that would apply to any other piece of legislation, so. Yeah, I mean, so
Yes.
to the extent that people are allowed to speak
Yeah.
on ordinances, they would also be able to speak on amendments.
Okay. Do we have any members of the audience who'd like to speak? I thought I saw some hands.
I think there's one.
John?
At least.
No, I'm sorry. I couldn't see your hand for the other stuff. Okay, please come up. 3 minute limit? I believe there's a piece of paper there, Ms. Kornansky. Please sign in. And when you're done with signing in, we do have a 3-minute limit on speakers, please.
Well, I would like to sign in for myself and also Elizabeth Story, who was unable to attend tonight
Please
because
do.
of family illness. So can I sign both of our names?
Please do.
My name is Joan Kornansky, and my address is 56 Mound Street. And I think I'd like to address the very last issue that Councilmember Butler brought up, and that the law director spoke to, and that was the exception. Oh, but you let so-and-so, I'm on the Board of Zoning Appeals. I've been on the Board of Zoning Appeals for years and years, and I think Council Member Pappy will agree with me how many times people have come and used within their argument that, well, so-and-so was given an opportunity to move their fence 1 foot or rebuild their garage and set it on the property line disregarding the rear setback, or have a driveway with X number of whatever in it. That argument will come back to haunt you. And I don't know necessarily that you would have to review that argument for Stimson or Carpenter, but you may have to review that argument for Court Street. At the corner of West Washington and Court, if you go up, any number of those apartment buildings could desire or wish to put a balcony out over the street. And you have set a precedence. And once you set a precedence, you have set a precedence, and you cannot take it back. So you really need to think this over carefully, what you're allowing to occur if you allow a full balcony to cover the sidewalk on Court Street at that particular point. And I think at this point I'd like to speak for Elizabeth Story, because I think she has some, beyond the plan, I think what she presents are some real-life experiences and some real instances that would affect health and safety, although I know this may be a sensitive issue to bring up, but as a woman, I have walked up Court Street, and the profanities, which I will not repeat here, that have rolled off of those balconies from both men and women at me were unkind And had I been 13 years old, do any of you have daughters? Can I roll into Betsy's? University people that bring foreign visitors, international visitors, walk up Court Street to show them the street. These are these situations that protrude out over the street and allow for large congregations of people to have merriment, and many of them have disrespect for passerbyers. And I will now read Elizabeth Story's statement. As a bicycle rider, my experiences riding along that section have not been easy, considering the very uneven bricks. There's no room for error when cycling Court Street as it is. I think one more balcony close to the street as another noise venue, as well as dangers to pedestrians, cars, and cyclists. From other balconies along Court Street, I have been spit at, had trash thrown at me, and heard music blasting way above noise ordinance level. A balcony over the sidewalk, not onto the street, but over the sidewalk gives easy access for projectiles to be thrown onto the street or into the sidewalk below. And noise is noise, no matter how many inches out from the building. I stand firm that an open balcony just adds potential for noise and an increasing party atmosphere that is on an already congested part of Court Street. If the rationale for granting this variance is that students will sign a clause in their lease regarding limited occupancy of the balcony, then let us consider all of the signed leases where renters agree to limit their house occupancy to 3 and how often that does not happen. We've seen it for years on our little part of Congress Street. I've talked with many student workers in the library. Elizabeth Story is retired from Alden Library, worked there for at least 20 years, who mentioned that the 3 renters to a house restriction is an easy, and she underlines, rule to get around. The balcony issue sounds like one more rule to ignore. And I would recommend that council members, when they leave this building or tomorrow in the daylight, look at the People's Bank building that we approved at the Board of Zoning Appeals. Those balconies are very narrow. Those residents seem to enjoy themselves. They can have a little fresh air. They're not protruding out in the street. They're not distracting. And they're definitely not offending people either verbally or physically. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the audience? Sir? She's signing in for 2 people.
Yeah, I'm not that slow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stole the pen, I think, or I didn't bring one, but thank you. Brian Wharton, one of the Gator guys. I've obviously been here a number of occasions now. The only few points of argument I would make there is certainly any amount of noise can come from a 2-foot balcony, out of windows. Something can be thrown from a 2-foot balcony, out of windows. So I don't think there's any more incentive for someone to throw something from a 2-foot balcony or a 4-foot balcony just because it's 2 feet bigger. This is an aesthetic. We obviously have done a lot of improvements to the building. We think that we've certainly tried to compromise, adding a middle barrier. We've come up with things in the lease. Certainly have thrown out 39 inches in the past, and continue to be willing to do that. And again, 39 inches, 48 inches, 24 inches. If someone's going to throw something from one, they're going to they're going to do it, regardless of how big it is. So, and we're talking 4 feet. I don't know if anyone's walked past there recently, but the concrete is cut back to where we would like the balcony to be, and it's being talked about like it's huge, and it's going to go out to the street, but it's really only 4 feet. So we certainly are willing to compromise, and we'll continue to be willing, and thanks for listening to me reiterate the same things I have before.
Okay. Other audience members? So we have an amendment to the ordinance in front of us for a vote. The amendment is to make the balcony 24 inches in width.
Is there, may I ask another brief question, perhaps? Is that appropriate?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if Member Pappy wanted to change the 24 inches to 30.
I think Member Pappy has indicated
No. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so we have the amendment as proposed for 24 inches wide balcony. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Okay. It sounded as though the amendment was voted down.
Do a show of hands, you may want to do that just to
Okay.
be clear.
All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Okay. Thank you. Those opposed to the amendment, please raise your hand. Okay. Clearly, the amendment has not been adopted, but there is a second amendment to be proposed. Member Pappy.
The second amendment is for a petition between the two units on the balcony.
I would like to second it.
I'd like just a point of order. There is, and we have discussed this in committee about, and we put it in section 3, that there shall include noise reduction design elements. And I don't know if we want to be more specific than that by having a divider to, you know, we can do a comma including a divider between the two units. Is that? Because that's what I think that when we talked in committee, that's kind of what that was supposed to be. So we can make it more specific. Is that what we want to do? Just under 3. Because that's kind of what we discussed in committee. So.
Yeah, I guess I would just need to, or want to have some idea of exactly what the amendment is, what section it is that we're amending. So is that?
So I would say that we're looking at section 3, number 3.
Okay.
And we could include in that comma or a petition between the two apartment units on the balcony.
Just being more specific in the language that we put in already. I mean, we've talked about this in committee, and I guess we want more specific.
Okay. So that's the amendment. And it's been seconded.
Could I?
Has there been a second on that?
We had a second.
Yeah, I seconded the petition.
Okay. So, but Member Patterson.
I just have a friendly suggestion to the amendment, or a possible other amendment. As I read this, I'm looking at it, and it has 25 individuals, and if it's 2 units, I'm wondering who gets to have 13 guests and who gets to have 12. And with the sound barrier, is it possible to make it 24 instead of 25, or some other compromise to the...
I don't know who's counting.
Well, we can. I mean, you put that in your...
But 12 per unit, per
unit.
side, or whatever.
That'd make it easier administratively, or a half person. And that's a really short person. I'm always counted as a half.
Or a child.
The economy unit. So is that a new amendment? Can we withdraw and read?
The other I'm sorry, just to throw this out, I suggest another option would be to table the amendment and refer it to committee for further debate if we're not clear on.
I think we don't want to go back into committee with this. I mean, we can strike the 25 and leave it up to the mayor in the negotiation.
Yeah.
Or we can just change 25 to 24 and
Since you want
reword
both.
the amendment, but I think we want to move on. We don't want to see this in committee again, do we? No. No, I don't. We can move to another committee.
Councilmember Pappy, are you acquiescing to the striking of the 25-person limit as part of your
I am.
amendment? Okay, and the second, you're seconding that as well?
Sure.
Okay.
But this time the mayor's hand is up.
I'm not sure what kind of negotiation you want me to do. If this is in the ordinance, it would stay in the ordinance, the 25 people limit. They can always split the baby. The other question I have, unknown, of course, well, when you talk about design elements and noise reduction, I'm not sure what that looks like. Is that an 8-foot fence? Is that a, giant wad of styrofoam? Is it a partition somebody can leap over so we have that zitter person going back and forth, Again, I'm not sure what a partition is discussed right now.
Well, I think now that we've done a partition.
How big is that petition? Can
Well,
you tell me?
I
What's
guess,
your visual there?
well, the thing is that you can have an ordinance that gets into the the most detailed part of the ordinance is the 4-foot. That's going to stand because that amendment failed. But other than that, one of the ideas is that this ordinance gives some leeway to establishing, noise reduction design elements. I mean, there are other ordinances out there in ordinance land in other cities that specifically say things. We talked about it in committee, quite a bit. And I think that what we really did talk about was either on the ends doing plantings, like with vines, and having a partition in the middle. And I think that those sort of things, I think that you can make it very difficult, but you don't need to, even though we've allowed some negotiating room, which I would think you would want because it's easier to split the hairs than have everything laid out for us, because we don't want to see the ordinance back again.
Well, okay, remember, this is a revocable use of the right-of-way, so council is in charge of revoking this. So if you don't like what you see, you can go back and revisit it at that time.
I mean, I think that what we put in Section 3 and what we're now splitting hairs over, a majority on the council seems fairly comfortable with it. So we're trying to massage it to the point where it makes sense with the partition, and reducing the 25 to 24, 12 to each side. And otherwise, I think you could put a gazillion little points in here, and
Okay.
you'll never get everything.
I was just looking at guidance, that's all.
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm clear on what exactly the amendment is, and we need to know exactly what it is that we're voting on.
So the amendment is, looking at section 3, number 3, that we're adding a partition to that statement between between each side of the balcony.
What I have from what you had
Between
said
the
before is just a comma and a partition between the 2 apartment units on the balcony, is that
Yes.
correct? And then what, if anything, is the amendment doing as it pertains to Section 5 on the 25-person limit then?
It is limiting it to 12 people per side, per partition, or
So
Per unit.
everything
Per
stays the same
unit.
except for not more than 12 persons shall occupy?
per unit
Okay.
balcony.
Okay. And you seconded that as well?
Kent did.
Correct.
And-
Thank you.
Mr. President, I'm sorry, I just wanted to
Okay,
clarify
no.
that.
So the law director is clear. Are we all clear what we're voting on? That we're asking for a partition between the 2 balconies, between the 2 apartments on the balcony, and limiting the number of people to 24, 12 on each side. That's what I understand. Is that what you're hearing also? Do we have audience members who wish to speak to this? No? Okay. So all those in favor of the second amendment signify by raising your hands, please. Okay,
We said in support.
1, 2, 3, 4. Those opposed to the second ordinance. agree. Excuse me?
That one passed.
Yes. Okay. So, the,
Completely new ordinance.
excuse me?
New and improved ordinance.
Okay, we have yet to, excuse me, we're not going to vote on it. We're just,
So it's been read for the first, amended and read for the first time.
was it read for the first time?
Right.
Okay. It's been so long ago.
And will
Okay,
be
the
read-
ordinance has been read for first reading and has been amended once, actually. We did not approve the First Amendment, so we amended it for a partition and reduction by one person on the balconies. Okay. So we're going to move on to Ordinance 2313, an ordinance granting the renewal of a revocable license to Kimes Convalescent Centers, 75 Kimes Lane, to allow a directional sign on the public right-of-way. Member Fall.
Joni, don't leave us. No. Yes, right-of-ways. We love right-of-ways. This is for a 10-year renewal for a sign that's already there, that's been there for many years for Kimes, so that people can find Kimes from the road. It's been signed, everybody signed off on it and is happy with it.
Again, this is a renewal.
A 10-year renewal.
This is a renewal of a license that is already in effect.
That's right.
The sign, however, I need to point out, the sign is on city right-of-way. It's not on Kimes property.
That's why they need a revocable license.
It's
Thank
not
you.
hanging in the air.
It's not hanging in the air, it's just kind of there. Nobody's complained about this one, so it's a happy right-of-way.
This ordinance has been read for the first time. And we move on to a one-reading resolution. Resolution 0313, a resolution opposing the passage of House Bill 5 by the Ohio General Assembly, which proposes uniformity measures for municipal income tax in the form of unfunded mandates and a substantial loss of revenue. Introduced by all council members. Which council member would like to speak? Member Nisner?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of Resolution 313.
Second.
And this particular resolution is kind of Chapter 2 to what was earlier in our last legislative session called House Bill 601. And what it does is proposes certain tax uniformity rules for municipalities across the state. At the time that this was earlier considered in House Bill 601, we also issued a resolution against this. We are doing so again with this resolution in 2013, and we're joining other municipalities across the state of Ohio as we have been urged by the Ohio Municipal League that this has some very detrimental effects. And I might draw your attention to just a few of the whereases. The third one down, municipalities they agree that revenue neutral uniformity on issues will ease compliance burdens. So that's one point, and I don't think we are for certain that certain kinds of practices that are revenue neutral. We're not opposed to that. But if you go to whereases below that, what we have done in our particular resolution is highlight approximately how much money we could stand to lose. Now, some of this is that we have lost approximately $1 million through local government funds and several other things. So one of them is $473,000 of local government funds and $259,000 of estate tax, which Auditor Heck mentioned earlier this evening. But in addition to that, then the loss of the tangible personal property tax, $144,000, and the loss of the estimated revenue from this particular House Bill 5 would be an additional $200,000. And with funds and budgets as tight as they are, we think that it's worthwhile to support this resolution to oppose House Bill 5, to prevent further loss of local municipal funds.
Those numbers that you just read were the city of Athens.
That is the city of Athens alone, that's correct. So it's a pretty dramatic kind of effect that it could have on our community, but many others around the state.
We have, yes.
I just want to speak on another issue with this. I completely support this resolution. I will vote affirmative for it. But what I'm really concerned about is this seems to be another state government power grab to take more power away from the local communities and consolidate it at the state level. And the right of taxation of a community that has organized itself and is incorporated is a very fundamental right, and we're losing it. And once we lose it, it's lost. And I think we really need to join with all the other communities that are in the same danger as we are and say, no, enough's enough. We know you need to balance your budget at the state level. We understand that, but don't try to take money from us in order to do it. So I urge all the other council members and everybody else to vote affirmative for this.
Member Paul.
I'd like to point out that, like what Councilmember Reisner just said, it's usurping home rule from us. And also, the amount of money that we will be losing does not necessarily go into the state coffers, because many of the parts of the Senate Bill 5 or House Bill 5 is basically 20 days where a company may not necessarily taxed in a municipality. That tax does not necessarily go to the state, it's just not being collected. So this seems to be a way of hitting us at the local level and giving yet another corporate tax break for many people and for many corporations. I understand the uniformity issue as being a business issue. However, having enough police and fire and streets that you can drive on is a business issue also. People don't want to go and open businesses where you don't have enough fire, you don't have enough police, your streets are crummy, and every year you're worrying about another $200,000 being cut from your budget that's going who knows where. And I'll stop now.
Anybody else?
Well said.
Auditor Head.
Thank you, Member Reisner, Member Fall. I agree with that 100%. And there was a quote that Tina had wanted in here, but Member Nisley probably wisely removed that from a representative of K6 office, saying that the responsibility should be with the communities for raising the taxes needed for their services. But this totally takes that away from us.
Yes.
It's so contradictory. And it's just really hard. And I think this is another issue, but as we all know, the new budget bill has come out. And there are a lot of issues in that are going to make it difficult for us if it passes as is and cost us revenue on top of what we already know that we're losing and that this would cost us.
Audience member, Mr. Luce, you need to sign in.
Sorry, I'm writing as fast as I can. I just want to applaud you for taking this stance, and I would wholeheartedly support this approach. I do believe that we are being stripped of all the money that the state can take from us, and enough is enough. And I think it's great that this is a unanimous stance for something that's right.
Okay, we have any other audience members wish to speak? Thank you. Resolution 0313 has been read, and we have a second. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Would the clerk please note that it was unanimously passed? Thank you. Announcements and other business. Next week, we will have committee meetings. Any committee chairs know that they have, Member Fall is waving her hand. Okay, Member Nisley.
I think we're called standing committees.
Okay, and of course, other committee chairs can always add to that. Member?
I just had a quick question regarding the resolution we just passed. Is it fair to assume then that we will be sending a letter to the state with acknowledging our vote on this and our take? Is that, thank you. I would request that.
We've done that in the past, and I don't know that we included that in this, but yes, I would like to see this forwarded on. If you want me to do that, that's fine.
Yeah, it should go to every member of the legislature.
Yeah. I think they need to know how all the different entities feel about this. And
Right.
I just want to say thank you to council. You've been so supportive to me. We passed a similar resolution last year when they introduced it as House Bill 601. Came back this year as House Bill 5, and just all the other things we're trying to do in my office to help us pay for our services.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good point, Member Butler. Thank you. Okay, now we have an opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and city services that were not covered on our agenda.
I had other business.
Okay, excuse me.
I'm sorry, yeah, we saw some more announcements.
Do we have other announcements?
I do.
Oh, okay, I understand.
I would like to bring up something that we haven't, it's been in the news a lot here lately, we haven't really discussed at council. And there's obviously some move afoot, and there's been a lot of community people who have been discussing this, and this is regarding what's going on at the Ridges. And so there's been some information that has been put out. I know the mayor's aware of it, and quite a few people are on council. Back when the state turned over the Ridges to the university, there was a group that was formed, and that's under a House Bill 576. And there's a section in this bill where they talk about an advisory committee. So it says that the Board of Trustees of Ohio University shall create by resolution an advisory committee, and then it goes on and it says the advisory committee may do all of the following. So looking back at some of the historical issues that happened with this, apparently there was quite a board. There was a whole group of pretty involved community members. Names some of you may remember: Ora Anderson, Dr. Unger, who was on plant biology, Karen Harvey, different people. And I think she was the commissioner who was appointed. And the law here talks about who was appointed. Some of the concern right now with what is going on up there, this group did not continue to meet. And under Section 8, it says Section 1 through 5 and 7 of this act shall expire 1 year after its effective date. So apparently, it went on till 91. This happened in 88. And the group disbanded. They made some type of a recommendation, though I don't know that our city council or the mayor has ever seen any minutes of what that final plan was. So there are quite a few in the community who are concerned about the present, but also concerned with what is the future of the buildings at the university and the Ridges. And different people have written letters. I have one in front of me that I know was sent to the mayor from a Tim Traxler, and he has a 2-page letter here that goes on about the historical nature. I know the Ohio's Hill Country Heritage Area has also written up a large document about the historical nature and the importance of saving buildings. And so I guess what I'm asking, and maybe the mayor can talk about this a little bit too, is if we could ask the university to review the plan or see the plan. It just seems like this is so much of a town and gown issue, and I don't know how much we've really been apprised of what's going on. I know currently there's a lot of concern about they are going to tear down the building, and they're going to be going through the land lab, and I know, you know, the people who are on that committee are very concerned about the trucks going through the land lab, and there's some other reasons cited for that with some other research up there at the ridges. But the bottom line is, it just seems that we as council, when you look back at the intent or the, I don't know if intent's the right word, I'm not a lawyer. The spirit of this law or whatever, they were encouraging community support, and that also included commissioners, you know, the county, and they had this broad knowledge of it. So I just wanted to throw this out. I think it's something we have not discussed. I think it needed to be brought forward, and here we are.
Okay, I'll tell you the truth. First I heard about advisory council of this nature, committee of this nature was last Tuesday in the middle of a water line break. I don't think I've ever seen really the plan for the ridges. I've been sitting through this for a long time. So if there, I did have a discussion with some of the university administration there, and they said this was an ad hoc committee at that time. They said the plan, at the original plan when it was slated, was the demolition of the TB ward at that time. Again, I have not seen the plan, so I do not know. I know there is concern about preservation of the building structures up there, as Mr. Traxler mentioned. I've had some conversations with other people about trying to preserve as much as ridge as possible. The discussion actually has bridged out to, you know, this could be a possible tourist attraction. I think Mr. Traxler's Hill Country missive there talks about there aren't that many structures of this nature, so therefore it could be a destination. I've not been involved in it at this point. I could put some of my people on it. Again, I'm hesitant to jump in because of where the process is. At the same time, I recognize that we should try preserving what we have up there. Staff meeting-wise, we've discussed the route, taking it through the preserve, the land lab, mostly for where it would come out, which is Dairy Lane. And Dairy Lane is not a robust street for hauling trucks through. The preference, of course, would be going the other direction towards 682, but again, this is just discussion, early discussion. So I'll probably be it's been a topic, I think, for the past couple meetings at the university level and the service safety director level, but I don't think they've really actually talked that much about the preservation of it, just the mechanics of it.
Can I make a suggestion? I suggest that we talk about this at a planning and development committee, seeing how it has a lot to do with planning. We can do a committee as a whole. But between now and either next week or 2 weeks from next Monday, get more information from, you know, minutes that maybe goes back, and the university can maybe dig, and the other city departments can do some digging, and Paul Logue can do some research on it, and that we bring it together and discuss it as a whole council, so that we can put forward some ideas. And that, because I think that tonight it makes sense to bring it up, but I think it makes sense to discuss it more at length in a committee meeting. And I don't know if next week would make sense, because I don't only give a short amount of time for people to be able to do research, or if we want to bring it up in 2 weeks from Monday.
Well, I would just move that we know that the building is imminent. At least that's what the news is telling us. I don't know if anybody has, Jim, I don't know if anybody has any understanding of when this is actually supposed to come down and those kind of things. Again, I'm really concerned about the future. It seems that this group, they say ad hoc. It says nowhere in here ad hoc in this statute. It says nothing about ad hoc. And it seems that they were tasked with coming up with a plan. And so if that was the case, and according to this, that should exist somewhere.
Right,
And that
but we
should
can-
be written, and I
And
understand
we
that.
need to bring it up at a committee meeting.
And a huge part of this was that the community, again, it says, a member of the county commissioners, the mayor or member of the legislative authority, township trustee, 3 or more individuals who reside in Athens County. So it was obviously, the spirit of this was very much a community, historical kind of situation. And yes, we may have these administrative meetings, but nobody's really talking about it, either because they didn't know about it. So I don't know. So I just think it's something to put out there.
Thank you. I want to express thanks to Member Packey for doing the research and looking this up and familiarizing us with that. Again, I definitely believe this is an issue we should discuss in committee and support it, because I think many of us value the historical preservation, and we have an ordinance coming up, architectural and historical preservation. I think there's a lot of issues that need to be discussed here regarding this, and there's many other buildings up there besides the one that's being slated for potential demise. So it's not just one building. So thank you.
Mayor Weil?
I would agree. When I got this Tuesday from Mr. Lucier, I scanned it, sent it to Dr. McDavis, and Ms. Diagardi replied to me, called me up and said it was an ad hoc committee. Although when you read section 6B3, review periodically the progress of implementation of the comprehensive land use plan and recommend to the board, when appropriate, revisions to that plan. It's always nice to learn that you're on a board that you didn't know about after 5 years. So it does put a different tone on that, what we want to
Different
see
spin
happen
on it,
here. Again, I hesitate to jump in because the city is, an owner of a building that's in mothballs right now, at least 2 that I know of that we have issues with. So therefore, to tell somebody to hold on to it and what to do with somebody else's property, I hesitate to jump in on that, especially at this point in time. I am aware of the fact that they're, a lot of those buildings are still degrading and they should be looked at. I'm aware of the fact that talking to the various organizations, they think there's funding available out there if they can secure it. I think that's something the university should be working with us
Or
on.
other buildings, or, that are in disrepair.
Yeah. So there are issues discussed there. I know there's concept of shared governance within the university. I know the 5 Cs include community. So there are precedents and avenues to address this. You remember in the past, we actually had a university relations committee many years ago, which whittled down, and I guess everybody thought it was okay to let that drop. I know we've kind of whittled down how many committees in general for the council.
So I was on there.
Yeah, see?
I
So-
just point one other thing out in this statute. It says Section 8, Sections 1 through 5 and 7 of this act shall expire 1 year after its effective date.
But
So-
6 is,
But 6
Yes.
is hanging out there, and that's this kind of ongoing committee. So did the Board of Trustees in 05, 06, 10, did they say, oh, no, we're not going to have that anymore? Does anybody know that? And I think that's what we need to find out.
Member Fall is suggesting we have a committee meeting. Let's try, if we can find information by next week, we'll do it. If not, we'll have to put it off a couple weeks after that.
Well, and could that be a request from the university for minutes or discussion?
as far as I know, a lot of it's been turned over to the county commissioners and Keller Blackburn in terms of information.
I would also ask council members to think about what we could do, instead of just asking for minutes, but how, if we need to put an ordinance forward to reconstitute this committee, or if we want to have this as the historical commission's first big thing. Yeah. No, I'm only kidding on that one. But we need to think about concrete steps instead of just sitting here talking about the past and what was, and we need to think about what will and push us and the community and the university together and be solution-oriented.
And to put a bigger hat on this, you might want to think about what the EI zone means exactly.
Yes.
I believe when that was put forward by a previous council, it was vetoed by the previous mayor because of its neighborless nature.
Yes,
Okay.
very nebulous, yes.
Could I simply make the suggestion that we make sure we contact the university if we put this on our agenda for next Monday, just so they're not caught off guard by a discussion of it? Give them the chance to be aware of
To be aware,
what
to
we're discussing.
attend.
Yeah.
You don't think they're watching right now? Bated breath?
We have other shows to put them to sleep.
Yeah.
Member Reisner?
No, I was just going to ask Councilmember Gosney if he thought that this council meeting was so dull that they wouldn't be watching it right now.
Actually, in the
No
spirit of
comment.
community, you should let them know.
Yes. That would be correct.
Go through the balconies and that's,
Okay. We have Mr. Luce who wants to speak to this issue, I believe.
Thank you. Do I have to sign in twice?
No, this is,
Okay, thank you.
Just don't break our microphone.
What's that? Don't break the microphone.
It's historical.
First of all, Michelle, thank you very much for bringing the issue forward. I think it's a very important one. And I think one of the major issues for this city is our future and tourism and bringing businesses in here. I think the ridges are one of our great treasures. And I know there's been a lot of talk about Building 26, and I sure would hate to see Building 26 destroyed. And I have actually worked with a couple of companies or developers who are willing to put the millions of dollars necessary into repairing the building, and yet the university has chosen to ignore that. They claim that the first person backed away. I don't know that to be true, but I had another person. The fact is, if I can do that in a couple of weeks, come up with potential developers who might actually make that property into something, seems like the university could be doing that too. And perhaps they don't wish to for whatever reason. But if Building 26 goes down, there are lots of other buildings up there that are rotting away, neglected. They are being demolished by neglect. And I think that the city should be concerned about this. It's a part of the heritage of this entire community. It's a concern about a major tourist attraction for the future. And this is all land that could, these buildings, as they are, once they're repaired, could be a major moneymaker for this community and for the university. And I can't comprehend for the life of me why we're so intent upon destroying them. The university claims right now that they're not talking about destroying the other buildings. If you look at their master plan, they absolutely were intending to tear down all of the buildings except for 5 buildings left on the ridges. Now they're backing away from that and saying that they're not going to do that. But the fact is that the very fact that these buildings are being neglected says that they are wanting them destroyed. So I think it would be a very brave thing on your part to take a stand and to talk to the university. I would love to have a friendly, cooperative, town gown, shared everything. This is our community. We all live in it together. This shouldn't be an us and them. But unfortunately, it seems at the moment it is, and I think your expression of concern, an immediate expression of concern rather than waiting a week or two, would be good, and then take some positive actions after you've expressed that concern, as you suggested, is a very, very powerful thing.
thank you. Okay, so is somebody going to take the responsibility to contact the university? I can do that, or the mayor's office? She pointed at me. Okay, I'll do that and then follow up with the mayor's office.
Okay.
Have any other audience members who wish to speak to us tonight? Hearing or seeing none, we have 2 tentative meetings on our agenda for committee meetings next week. Please let the clerk know if you have more. And right now, we are going to declare adjournment at 9:20.